Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, best place to get all of your Eagles and other NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt. And ladies and gentlemen, preseason week 2 is behind us. And for Eagles fans, the annual Eagles Open practice is also behind us, which I was lucky enough to be able to go to this year. So I will have some information and some personal insights that I have from attending such event from yesterday. But before we hop into all of that kind of jazz and my projected 53-man roster, I would ask if you guys could leave a like and subscribe down below. That would be much appreciated. Your support never goes unnoticed here on this channel because how small we are. So a simple like and a simple, sometimes a comment. And if you're not subscribed yet, a simple press that subscribe button down below can go a long way here at the Flying with the Flock podcast. Okay, so with all that jazz out of the way, let's hop right into the most recent preseason game, analyze what happened, the good and the bad, and then we can move on to some other topics later down the line. So the Philadelphia Eagles, after a few days of competing against the New England Patriots in Foxborough in joint practices, all the tension that was building up, although a lot of the tension was between the starters, all the tension that was building up was able to be put on full display in front of the nation as the Philadelphia Eagles fell to the New England Patriots 24-21, and we'll get into how they lost and my concerns around that. But I want to say before we get into it, it was overall an amazing performance for the offense compared to preseason week 1. And it kind of is telling that Sean Mannion shifted himself up to the booth this week. And ultimately, the offense runs more efficiently. The formations are better. The false starts are less. And overall penalties on the line of scrimmage was a lot more controlled during this outing. I mean, taking a look at the raw stats, Andy Dalton went with the second team offense. They were the first team up. Andy Dalton went 3 of 10 for 44 yards. And let me just say, we're going to get into individual performances later. But to me, this was a game where he played himself out of the number 2 quarterback spot. Tanner McKee, really solid outing, not perfect. But we'll get into some of the hesitation that I saw out of McKee. He went 16 for 22, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So you would never be able to tell that he was a little bit iffy during his outing based off of the raw stat line here. And then you had poor Cole Payton, who went 1 for 1 for 10 yards and a strip sack at the end of the game to seal it for the Patriots. Rushing-wise, that was the story of the night. You had a guy like Will Shipley in the first quarter who took all the snaps, who had 11 carries for 56 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground. He was ultimately able to excel at what Saquon does best, in my opinion. And I've been saying this for years, that Will Shipley, his movement and his speed reminds me of a younger Saquon. Not in what he could be, just the similarities that I've picked up over the years. But ultimately, it looks like Will Shipley had a very good day on the ground and ultimately was able to pound away. Originally, by the end of the first quarter, he was projected to have, if he played the entire game the same way he did the first quarter, he was projected to have over 200 rushing yards. So I think that does say a lot in his ability and in the offense's ability to open up this run game, this wide zone run game. Another person I wanted to mention was Carson Steele, who had 12 carries for 33 yards on the ground, but that wasn't the most impressive part of the night. His most impressive part of the night came through the receiving game, with 6 receptions for 84 yards and 1 touchdown. That's on 7 targets, so he led the team in targets and receptions and receiving yards. He also had 2 hurdles during this game, and that was fairly impressive for me. I got quite a few texts from quite a few people saying he looked like White Saquon, and I was like, yeah, we need to hold up on that. I mean, he's good. He was good when he was with Kansas City as a depth running back, fullback, whatever they're using him for at the time. But ultimately, I do think that we need to kind of hold up on the idea that Carson Steele could be a starter in this offense. Rather, he's a really great piece, and he did a really good job during this preseason game, and he might have won himself a roster spot based off of his ability alone, especially in the open field. But I would certainly need to see it again to make sure that it's not just a fluke. Also in the receiving game, Darius Cooper, 3 receptions for 44 yards on 4 targets. He averaged roughly around 14.7 yards per reception. Stone Smart, tight end, one of our depth tight end guys right now, 5 receptions for 37 yards. Eric Azuma, damn, this is gonna trip me up. Azukanama had 3 receptions for 30 yards. Britton Covey also had 1 reception for 14 yards and 1 touchdown. I think Britton Covey, the only reason, and we're going to talk about this when it comes to my 53-man roster, that his spot might be in jeopardy is because during open practice, I saw a lot of other receivers and running backs punt return and kickoff return. So I just want to get in. We'll get into that later. But, yeah. Still had a really good game for himself. Somebody that isn't popping up here in the receiving stats is Eli Stowers. And I want to talk about Stowers real quick. He had 0 receptions for 0 yards on 2 targets. But both times they were not really his fault. The ball was kind of out of reach, and he would have had to go up at an awkward angle to catch the ball and possibly come down injured from a helmet sticking him in the ribs or something or other in that kind of vein. To me, Stowers was really solid in his ability in the blocking game, which was something that was a big concern coming into OTAs and minicamp was, yes, Eli Stowers can catch the ball. We all know that. He won the Blitnikoff back in college last year with, I believe it's Vanderbilt. But his ability to block was coming into question because he lined up a lot in the slot last season with his college. So, looking back at the tape, his blocking skills were on point, I would say, this game. No holding penalties. Realistically, played a really solid game blocking, had a lot of snaps lined up at where the tight end should be, not at the slot position. And overall, I do think that Eli Stowers kind of proved that no matter what, he's going to be a solid piece for this offense, especially in like in jumbo packages where we have 3 tight ends, or in packages where Dallas Goedert is the decoy and Eli Stowers is kind of the primary tight end target in that play. So overall, I do think Eli Stowers should be shouted out for his ability alongside Carson Steele. And Darius Cooper as well, though I do think both the duo of Steele and Stowers were more impressive in their own respective rights. Defense-wise, the top guy here is number 30, Shaun Wade. Wade is a 27-year-old corner. He had 10 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and no interceptions. But he seemed to play pretty well. Again, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. did phenomenal. Ty Robinson, I think, played his way into a roster spot. He was dead in the water, even according to Vic Fangio, that he was dead in the water earlier this training camp. But he's really brought it to life, especially over the past couple of weeks with the first and second preseason games. I just hope that he builds on top of that. He registered 2 sacks during this game, which he's one of 3 players, to register a sack at all, with him holding 2. Jeremiah Trotter holding 1, which we'll get to Trot here in a second, and Joshua Weru holding 1 as well, which we'll get to him as well here in a minute. Ty Robinson ultimately had himself a day, and I'm quite proud of where he's at currently with his abilities. He looked dominant on the defensive line, and the only person that looked more dominant on the defense was Jeremiah Trotter Jr. So let's segue over to him. Trot Jr., oh boy, there was one play where he just read the offensive line's blocking scheme to a T. He shot through the hole, and before Tommy DeVito, the quarterback for the Patriots during that time, could make a play at all, before he could even try to dump it off to the running back or find a man in a flat to get a quick pass off to, Trot was just all over DeVito and dropped him hard in the backfield. I mean, I think Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to prove that he is going to sometimes split reps with Jihad Campbell if Campbell isn't playing up to snuff this upcoming season. And so Trotter Jr., I had him making the roster anyway from earlier what I was hearing from training camp. But this, to me, that is one of the best defensive plays, especially in the preseason, that I've ever seen from a player. And so, to me, it kind of proves that he's gone beyond like a second string caliber, and he's more like the option B at the second inside linebacker position. Where is he at? Joshua Weru. Weru had 3 tackles and 1 sack. And mind you, they gave him a full sack here. That could have been technically a half a sack, but I think he got to the quarterback faster. Weru, flew off the edge, and you could make a strong argument that this outing really helped project him towards a starting roster spot. But he still needs a lot of kinks worked out. Sometimes couldn't figure out the blocking scheme that the defense had, and so he got caught up in it. Or he just wasn't able to get off the ball as quick. Now, Weru has a few years of collegiate football under his belt, but he still looked really solid. I would not expect him to be as good as he is today. So that it was really hard for me to place him, whether he'd be on a 53-man roster or whether he would be cut. If he is cut, he's 100% coming back on the practice squad. I can guarantee you that as soon as he clears waivers. But it's just deciding whether you want to take that risk on a guy that actually showed out in the last 2 preseason games, and especially the most recent one as a dominant presence off the edge. And the last guy I wanted to talk about this week on the defense is number 93, Uar Bernard. Bernard, it was actually cool to see him work out in person yesterday at the open practice. But Bernard registered his first ever tackle in football. He had 2 tackles, actually. I thought he only had 1, but he had 2 tackles. And so, to me, that is a good sign of things moving forward. He wasn't trying to out-muscle guys. He was trying to work them. And even sometimes when he wasn't even able to swim past or break up the offensive lineman's hands, he just bull rushed the guy back into the quarterback's lap to create pressure. So, hey, if that works, it works. I mean, we've seen Jalen Carter do that, and he sees a lot of success, so why can't another guy like Uar Bernard do that? We're going to have to wait and see. Tune in till the end of the episode to see whether Uar Bernard makes the roster, in my opinion. And the defensive tackle, the defensive line, all the different positions were so hard to place who was going to make it. And same thing for offensive line. But I think I got a solid list coming up here in a little bit. So that was the Eagles preseason game. It was really solid. Overall, I was quite happy with how the offense pushed the ball. Individual performances like Tanner McKee, I thought he was a little bit hesitant, and he was a little bit still starstruck from this new passing offense. He looked solid yesterday during open practice. He wasn't anything special, but he looked solid. And overall, I do think Tanner McKee kind of played himself into the quarterback 2 role for this upcoming season. I would just like to see him become more confident in possibly this last preseason game this Friday at 8 p.m. against the Bengals. And Andy Dalton, to me, is a shell of himself. There's even rumors right now that the Eagles could ultimately shop him and trade him for like a 7th round or a 6th round pick to a team like the Falcons, who are still have quarterback questions, or another team that I can't even think of right now that probably has quarterback questions and or just needs depth, veteran depth behind their starting quarterback. All right, so that's it for the Eagles-Patriots preseason game. Getting into some NFL news from around the league, Deshaun Watson was named the starting quarterback for the Browns, which doesn't ultimately surprise me, and it's not because of how talented he is, because he lost all of that when he started tearing shit in his knee. But Watson is a really solid... I'm not even going to touch on what happened back in 2020, 2021 and all the allegations. I'm not going to talk about that. His ability in Cleveland has dropped off significantly, and only a couple of days ago, like the day before he got named starting quarterback on Monday, so on Sunday after the preseason game, Cleveland fans were booing him, and so he had a comment that Cleveland fans, he had some form of comment about the Cleveland fans that I can't exactly repeat on airwaves here. But ultimately, I do think that was uncalled for. But Todd Monken and the Browns front office hands are kind of tied. They go in, I forget what their schedule is. Browns schedule. They play the Jaguars in Jacksonville, the Buccaneers in Tampa. So those are two really hard games right off the bat. I've heard the idea that they named Deshaun Watson the starter so he could play 2 road games, see if he can at least come out of that 1-1, finding some form of an upset there. And if he can't, eventually move on to his successor, who I believe is Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur, you could make the argument either way that both gentlemen played about as equally pretty badly, but still equal. Shedeur, I think, has a solid chance of coming in for the Browns, maybe week 3 or week 4, depending on how Deshaun is playing. And ultimately, I think he just needs to wait. I think he needs to wait until this contract, the Browns can move on from it, and then this ball and chain around their ankles can be kicked off, and they can actually move on with how they want to direct their franchise moving forward under Todd Monken. And I do think Shedeur Sanders is a part of that, at least immediate future. It's just going to be interesting to see how long until Shedeur is the outright starter this upcoming season, and whether or not he's able to turn the team around compared to Deshaun Watson's plays, if that's the case early in the season. In other news, the NFL and Nike crossover with their rival uniforms have announced the Wave 2. And my opinion, you guys are going to have to look it up. I can't legally bring up any of the pictures right now. But the best one to me has to be the Houston Texans jerseys. I mean, they're completely white with blue and red, and they're playing into that astronaut theme that the Astros also play into over there, and that the Rockets also play into over there. I think that this is the closest that fans down in Houston are going to get to Houston Oiler jerseys, so buckle up and just enjoy it for now. But overall, I do think that those are the cleanest looking jerseys I've seen out of this out of the Nike rivalry jersey things. But overall, I do think it's really solid. The second best to me has to be their division rival, the Jacksonville Jaguars, another really clean-looking uniform. They got black pants with Jaguar print on them. They got like a cyan or aqua cyan helmet color, alternate helmet that looks sick. Originally, the photos looked like their jersey tops were white, but they look when going online to pre-order and buy them, they look more sandy. So that is fairly interesting. I would look out for that. But overall, I do think that those are the top two. Now, the worst two, I think the worst one to me is the Chicago Bears, where that literally just looks like a uniform the Bears have already. It looks as plain Jane as you can get it, and it looks like something that they possibly had maybe 2-3 years ago as an alternate uniform anyway. So I just don't feel really inspired. And the Colts one is the second worst, being all gray with blue. They literally had that 2 years ago. It was all black with blue accents. And it was like the Midnight in Indianapolis alternate jerseys. This one's just gray instead. It makes no sense. Both these teams already have jerseys that look like that. So overall, I think that they're pretty much a waste of time, in my opinion. Alright, so we're going to hop into some of the Eagles' open practice and my thoughts. Looking at some of the good, there were quite a few times where I felt like the offense was competing very well, scheme-wise, against this defense. I mean, Jalen Hurts, yes, we're going to talk about some of the... Well, this also falls into good and bad, so all this is really subjective. But we'll talk about Jalen throwing 2 interceptions. That's okay. I don't mind that. He's being aggressive with the ball. They were just 2 kind of poor ball placements, and that's okay. But overall, there were quite a few plays where I was like, holy crap. I know everyone's already heard of it, but it was like the play action, deep pass to Devontae Smith. And to me, that was just a good play by Q. That was a perfectly placed ball by Jalen. If it had a little bit more air behind it, I think it would have been perfect. Devontae Smith almost had the catch there, and it was just a good play by Quinyon Mitchell, who got his mitt in there and ripped out the ball from Devontae Smith. And that's really hard to do, so I got to give props to all 3 sides, the quarterback, the wide receiver, and the corner in that situation. There were quite a few times where I was like, Sean Mannion schemed up something really smart. The wheel route for Mekhi Lemon's first touchdown was very unexpected. I wasn't even watching that side of the field. I was watching technically, if you're the quarterback and looking at the field, I was watching the right side of the field. And then I look over to the left, and Mekhi Lemon is wide open, and he just struts his stuff into the end zone. So there's a lot of good coming out of the offense with the scheme. Looked really solid, a lot of motion. Ultimately, I do think that we'll get into this in a little bit. Maybe a little bit too many shotgun passes for my liking. But I think that we're going to start to implement more under center moving forward. Defense, looking at the good, I think there are quite a few times where, although Jalen got the pass off, it could have easily been a sack on a slower quarterback, or it could have been a sack in general on Jalen. So I do think there are quite a few times where the pressure got through the offensive line, and that can be said for the second team as well. We didn't see much of the third team or the developmental team, but overall, I do think they did get a lot of them in there, whether it was with the second team or with the first team, which we'll talk about why they got a lot in the first team in a little bit. Defense-wise, secondary looked a lot better during this open practice than it did against the Patriots this past weekend, especially when you're talking depth-wise. To me, I do think that overall the depth of the secondary is a little bit concerning, but not even at the safety spot, at the corner spot. But we'll talk about that when we get to the 53-man roster and how I think that they're going to attack that moving forward. So that's kind of the good. The defense played up the snuff. They played as well as they should have. But the offense was able to get one over on them every once in a while. The defense did technically win the practice based off of the points, but I don't. If Jalen Hurts doesn't throw that second interception to Tariq Woolen, I don't think that I don't think that it's that big of a gap between the two units. Also, last good I wanted to talk about was Tariq Woolen making plays left and right. He's been quite quiet recently at training camp, but with with him being there out in the open now with 2 interceptions, it's going to be interesting to see how quarterbacks attack this secondary, with Coop covering the guy in the slot, Woolen covering the guy opposite of Quinyon. Who does he throw to? Or who does the quarterback throw to? Because Woolen's going to try to make a play on the ball, Quinyon's going to lock the guy down, and Coop's going to lock the guy down. So who do you want? Do you try to go after the playmaker who's going to try to force a turnover any second he gets, or are you going to go after one of the 2 lockdown guys? The bad to me, there was too much time for Jalen in the pocket in a negative way. Like, he held on to the ball too long. I felt like he needed to get the ball out a lot faster, and he just sometimes looked indecisive. It was a very up and down practice for Jalen. I do think that he looked solid, but I don't think he looked the best that he has during training camp so far, according to reports. On top of that, some of the drop passes, like some of these passes, like there should have been an easy first down. And it was Jalen Hurts rolling out to the right on a bootleg, found Devontae Smith cutting across the field. Jalen Hurts just tosses it right towards Devontae Smith's hands, and he drops it. So that was kind of on Devontae there, I'm not going to lie. And there was quite a few times when we'll get to that in a second. There was quite a few times when the Eagles defense also let up a lot of soft coverage, and just the offense was able to find a hole, which was good, but that's bad for the defense. They should be a little bit tighter as a unit. This is the first team that we're talking about, and a lot of these guys were the starters last year. So that was kind of the bad, in my opinion. Too many drop passes, too long in the pocket, and to me, not enough plays under center. Too many plays out of shotgun. Sure, they might be play-action passes out of shotgun, but this offense, this West Coast-style offense, has to be played efficiently from under center. Jalen Hurts was probably under center maybe 40% of the time, but that also gives you 60% of the time that they're out of shotgun, which I personally don't like. So hopefully that's only like an open practice kind of thing, where they don't want to show all the packages they have from under center. But overall, I do think that there needs to be a lot more plays from under center throughout a game than what was showed during open practice yesterday. Circling back to one more thing that was good, the running offense was amazing. I think that this is some of the best, the most run-friendly offense that we've seen, and to me, Saquon and Tank Bigsby are going to have themselves both years if everything goes right and everyone stays healthy. Alright, so the ugly to me is the injuries. Lane Johnson got injured, or at least tweaked something early. He walked off the field with the trainers, and he just stood on the side of the field, helmet off. Eventually, he was kind of just by himself, so hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully we don't need to worry about Lane Johnson and any form of injury coming out of open practice. I swear to God, every time I go to open practice, somebody gets injured. Last year it was Dickerson. This year it was Lane Johnson. So hopefully that's not anything too major. In the same vein, Jordan Davis also came off eventually. This was a little bit later on in the practice. Like, we're talking closer, 3/4 of the way through. And he was talking with the trainers. He was talking with Howie Roseman a little bit. He put on an arm brace. I forget whether he had it on to begin with or not, but hopefully, again, just something minor. Today, the Eagles have their last training camp practice, so overall, I do think that it's fairly important to see who's healthy and who's not, but they still got another over 2 weeks till their first game, and I do think that Lane Johnson and Jordan Davis can get a lot of rest in between point A, which is right now, and point B, which is week 1. Some of the other ugly was some of the passing. Some of the routes were off with some of the deep passes. And some of the ball placement, not just by Hurts, but by McKee and Dalton as well, seemed very off. The last thing I want to say was kind of ugly was sometimes Hurts would take reps with the second team in order so he could get a feel with the with different linemen, which is okay. But I don't know, man. Sometimes it just feels off seeing your quarterback one with backup linemen. I personally don't like it. I rather them just kept them with the ones and filled in every once in a while with maybe switch out because Landon Dickerson wasn't practicing, but that was rest. So they had a guy new guy at left guard and a new guy at right tackle. Well, maybe flip it. Bring in switch Fred Johnson over to left tackle, bring in another new guy at right tackle, and bring in a new guy at left guard again. Sometimes switch it up, but ultimately I do think that there wasn't too many pieces of ugly, per se, during this open practice. I was just hoping that the offense would be able to be up to snuff, and they were at a lot of times. Just sometimes it was kind of upsetting to see Jalen Hurts underthrow a route to Devontae Smith and that get picked off. Alright, so that's open practice out of the way. So now, last thing I want to touch on for this episode is my projected 53-man roster for the Eagles. I'm going to go through each position group, explain why I think that person is going to be in that position, and if there's a notable person that I left off of the list, I'll go over what's either going to happen to them or why I left them off. At quarterback, it's easy. You have three quarterbacks. You have Jalen Hurts at quarterback 1. I believe Tanner McKee played himself into quarterback 2. And then you have, this was a harder one to decide, and this all depends on how the Eagles want to deal with Dalton. You have Andy Dalton at number 3, in my opinion. Now, if they feel like moving Dalton is a better decision than keeping him on the roster, and then keeping Cole Payton on the roster, I have no problem with that. It was a really hard decision between Dalton and Payton. I went with the more veteran guy, so that room has a veteran presence outside of Hurts. But I could easily see the Eagles shopping Dalton and trading him to a quarterback-needy team that realize that they don't really have that great of quarterbacks heading into the regular season, and so they need a veteran guy who can come in, is kind of plug and play, and deliver depending on the offense. And so to me, Dalton, for now, is on the starting 53-man roster, and Payton is the one being cut and probably brought back on the practice squad. But don't be surprised if you see Payton on the roster and Dalton not being on the roster due to Dalton's play or possibly being traded somewhere else. When it comes to wide receivers, I took 6 wide receivers. Starting out, Devontae Smith, Dontavian Wicks, Mekhi Lemon. Those all make sense. All those guys, although Smith and Lemon have been dealing with injuries, hamstring injuries specifically during camp, it was nice to see them move out there, and I don't really have any question about their availability come week 1. They're moving really well, and Christ, Mekhi Lemon caught a touchdown yesterday. I can't wait to see that in an actual game. Devontae Smith, Dontavian Wicks has had an amazing training camp, and he is ultimately the wide receiver number 2 until Mekhi Lemon gets up to speed with the offense to the point that Devontae Smith and Dontavian Wicks are. Then I also have 3 depth wide receivers, the first being Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore made a lot of plays yesterday during open practice, during preseason. So to me, he's kind of a no-brainer, a veteran presence beyond Smith's years in this wide receiver room, and a reliable target for Hurts if we bring on 4 wide with wide receivers. Next up, I kept Darius Cooper. Darius Cooper ultimately, I think, has been one of the best players on the offense during this training camp, and you can make the argument of all training camp. It's kind of a no-brainer that they're going to keep Darius Cooper around long-term and hopefully develop him into the quarterback for next year. Lastly, the last wide receiver that I have the Eagles keeping is Hollywood Brown. I think that they kind of paid him a decent amount of money. Again, a veteran wide receiver presence, and he was solid yesterday during open practice, and he's been okay during preseasons. Obviously, when we made the signing, I was expecting more out of the guy, but he's been serviceable, and so for me, that's enough to keep him around. Now, coming up, we have running back, and this is a little bit of a controversial one. You don't see too many people have the Eagles keeping 4 running backs. So my 4 would be Barkley, obviously, Bigsby, good depth piece for Barkley, Shipley. Shipley has proven to be a staple at the running back position behind Saquon year in and year out for the past 3 years. And to me, Will Shipley kind of also made a statement with the first quarter against the Patriots, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar coming up against the Bengals in the first quarter this Friday. I also decided to keep Carson Steele, because Steele was an amazing threat, especially in the receiving game, and I do think that if a guy, God forbid, like Bigsby goes down, I'm not sure the Eagles exactly want to send Shipley out there immediately. They might send Steele out there behind Barkley, and maybe even have him as a fullback kind of role, because I didn't keep Cameron Latu on this team. He might come back on the practice squad, so that's a little hint towards tight ends. But to me, Carson Steele can come in and play fullback too. He's got a wide frame, and then he can also receive out of the backfield as well. So to me, Steele kind of earned a spot, especially after the Patriots preseason game, and I think it would be hard to make an argument. You can make an argument either way, but it would be hard to make an argument to cut him after what I just saw. Tight ends, I only have them keeping 3. Goddard, Johnny Munt, which is the blocking tight end they brought on, one of the first free agent acquisitions that the Eagles made. I don't think they're getting rid of him. I think he's coming on, and he's going to be the blocking tight end. And if he plays good this year, possibly long-term for the Eagles, he could be the blocking tight end that this offense needs outside of Goddard. And then lastly, I have Eli Stowers as well. Hard to cut a second-round pick. He's been playing solid, in my opinion, when you actually break down the film. Obviously not making flashy plays in the passing game. Well, that's okay. He's only a rookie. It's only his first year. But I think Stowers will be tight end number 3 behind Goddard and Munt in this offense. Offensive line. So instead of breaking it down to tackles and then guards and then centers, I just did all the offensive linemen in one area. I have the Eagles keeping 12 offensive linemen. Now, if you know the Eagles, you know that it's quite common that they're going to keep a lot of depth at the trenches. So both offensive and defensive linemen. I have quite a few between the two positions combined. They make up 23 of the spots on this roster. But to me, depth is important. Deciding who's going to be there, though, that was the question. So getting our starters out of the way, Lane Johnson, Tyler Steen, Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata. All right, so that's our starting offensive line out of the way. Here's our backups. Now, we're probably going to be bringing on more on the practice squad, which doesn't count towards the 53-man roster. They need to clear waivers. So if you don't see a name on here that you were kind of hoping would make the team, there is a chance that they could come back in some capacity in the future. I have Fred Johnson. Now, Fred Johnson could be shopped. He could be shopped out to a offensive needy team that need either depth or need a starting right tackle. Hopefully the Chargers don't get any more offensive line injuries during the preseason or training camp, but that happens a lot for them. It happened last year and it's happening this year. The 49ers as well. But Fred Johnson, to me, is a perfect swing tackle for this Eagles offense, and is a perfect depth piece to either play left or right tackle. So that's why, and he's been consistently great as a veteran here on this offense. Willie Lampkin, another guy that's had a stellar training camp, and he had an amazing open practice yesterday. I don't think he let up any pressure, and the offensive linemen were right in front of me blocking, and watching him run block and pass block was pretty entertaining at his stature. I know he's shorter in size, but he's still able to maneuver, and he almost blew some people over in the offensive line one-on-one drills. So, to me, Willie Lampkin has made a statement. He'll be on the squad. Drew Kendall has been on the squad for a long time. Really solid depth piece. Would I want him to start? Hell no. But still, I think that he's a really solid piece. I think he's a guy that the Eagles know that they can rely on. And he's had a solid camp. He's been running with the second team, so it wouldn't surprise me if we see Kendall be on this roster. And both Lampkin and Kendall both have an advantage because they can both be a center or a guard, depending on what the package or what the Eagles are looking for on offense. Next up, again, another guy that had an amazing camp, much better than anyone thought he would, that being Markel Bell. Now, Markel Bell is dealing with an injury. I believe it's thumb and something else. But so far, amazing player, makes amazing plays. He could be the future of the tackle position. Don't be surprised if you hear that this coming offseason. But Markel Bell, to me, making this roster quite easily. And then you have Michael Jordan, I think is a really solid depth piece, has been really great with the 2s and the 3s on the offensive line. And I think he kind of played his way into a starting roster spot. Myles Hinton just gives the Eagles a third piece at tackle. Whether it's right or left tackle, he can play both. He's not as good as a Fred Johnson at swing tackle. He's better at right tackle, Myles Hinton. But I think that ultimately having another tackle never really hurts at all. And lastly, I have the Eagles keeping Micah Morris, the guard, out of Georgia. Their 6th-round pick this past year. I think that his stature and his play, especially during preseason games, has kind of earned him a starting roster spot, but he's the last offensive lineman on there. So ultimately, I do think that he's on the bubble. He could go either way, but if he doesn't make the roster, he could come back on the practice squad and be a part of the team through that capacity. Moving on to the D-line. This includes the defensive tackles and the edge players, and sometimes they're listed as off-the-ball linebackers, but to me they're defensive edges because that's how my mind just works. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo, Jalix Hunt, Jonathan Grenard. Those are going to be your starting defensive linemen, in my opinion. Next up, we have Nolan Smith Jr. Makes sense. 1st-round pick. Still really solid, and he's had a better camp as of late. You would like to see him kind of earn that starting roster spot back from Jalix Hunt, but till then, I do think that Nolan Smith is going to be a depth piece behind Jalix Hunt. But he's going to be the first one on. It's not going to be anyone else. Getting into some depth pieces, I probably should put this guy ahead of most of this list, that being Arnold Ebiketie. Ebiketie played really solid during the preseason games, has been a little bit quiet during training camp. You would have liked to hear a little bit more out of him. But every once in a while, he does pop up making a good play or two. So you can make a solid argument that the Eagles are going to keep him as a depth piece. And plus, he was nearly a starter with the Falcons last year. So, to me, Ebiketie, really solid piece. He'll make the roster. Behind him, I have A.J. Epinesa. Stellar preseason games. I think that's some of the best. There's only a couple defensive linemen or defensive players as a whole that have had better preseason games than A.J. Epinesa. But that list is very short. So to me, Epinesa has truly earned himself a roster spot and is a really solid depth piece. If push comes to shove or if somebody is more tired, bringing on a veteran guy like Epinesa could be a smart move for Vic Fangio. Byron Young, he's been on the team for a few years now as a defensive tackle. Still a depth piece, but he's only behind Moro Ojomo, in my opinion. I do think that his strength and his ability has yet to be fully unlocked as a defensive tackle. But I do think that maybe, let's say, Moro Ojomo moves on this season. Byron Young is the next up in line behind Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, and I think that's when you're going to get the most out of a guy like Byron Young. Next up, I have Ty Robinson has played himself into a roster spot. In the early parts of training camp, I thought he was going to get cut. I thought he was going to be possibly make his way back onto the practice squad, or maybe not. But to me, Ty Robinson makes the roster, and I think that he's going to be a really solid depth piece. Might not see the field at all. That's okay. Maybe he does see the field. Who knows? But to me, Ty Robinson, really solid piece that I think will ultimately make the roster due to his performances in the preseason games and in training camp practices as of late. Last one. So is it going to be... I have two guys that I really thought, and it was really hard to make a decision. It was either going to be Joshua Oweru or Uwar Bernard. And I have the Eagles keeping Uwar Bernard. Here's why. Joshua Oweru, I believe, is a guy that could clear waivers and make it back onto the Eagles practice squad fairly easily. Uwar Bernard is a guy that I don't think that's going to happen. So they need to keep him inside the building, which means they need to keep him on the roster. There's no extra, unlike what some people might say, there's no extra 54th spot for International Pathway Program players. So Uwar Bernard has to take up a starting roster spot, and I think that he could be a really solid player. He might not see the field at all, and that's okay. But I think that he could be a really solid depth piece, and he can continue to learn from that defensive tackle room, and hopefully slowly improve his abilities over the next 2 seasons on this Eagles roster before he even touches the field, possibly as a depth rotation guy in the defensive tackle department. Joshua Oweru, I hope he stays with the Eagles, but I just think that a guy like Uwar Bernard only comes around once in a lifetime, and Joshua Oweru, hopefully he'll be back, but I don't think he's as special as what Uwar Bernard is. Getting to linebackers, you have Zach Bond, Jahad Campbell. I've already talked about Jeremiah Trotter Jr. He's staying. Last one, another staple of an Eagles depth piece, that being Samal Mondin Jr. Mondin has been on the Eagles roster for a few years now. All the linebackers rave about his work ethic. He's just never been able to see the field during a regular season game, and that's okay. So to me, Samal Mondin Jr. will make the roster. There's a chance that there could be 5 linebackers. You could see Chance Campbell make the roster, and maybe another position loses a player. Like maybe Carson Steele doesn't make the roster, and Chance Campbell does at the linebacker position. But this is one of the thinner positions that I do think on this defense that I do think could use some depth. Looking at the corners, you got Quinyon, Coop, Reek. Then you got Mac McWilliams, who I know Vic Fangio loves, and he's really solid. He's not the best, but he even took starting reps at some point recently during training camp alongside Reek. Oh, it was when what's his face? It was when Q went down with a was it a groin? It might have been a groin injury or was it a glute injury. But he went down with an injury, and Mac McWilliams started alongside Tariq Woolen during the regular season. Or not during the regular season, during training camp. Jesus. My mind's already on regular season, guys. Next up, I have Jonathan Jones, the former veteran corner, to come in, be the veteran presence in that room, in my opinion, and make a push possibly to start ahead of Mac McWilliams. Maybe the Eagles aren't happy with Mac McWilliams has been playing in the preseason games, and so they send Jonathan Jones out there first, who has some veteran experience at the corner position. Who knows? But ultimately, I do think Jonathan Jones makes the roster. And last one, because the Eagles have some form of sick, weird fantasy about this guy, it's Kelee Ringo making the roster. And my only reason is because for some reason they constantly bring back this guy, and he's just not that good of a corner. Let's be honest. I think they should have shifted him over to safety and had him played safety. But he's horrible, guys. He's not that good, but somehow he's going to make the 53-man roster. He's going to take up a roster spot. And then guys like Joshua Weru, who could actually be a really solid depth piece, are going to miss the roster. Or a guy like Chance Campbell is going to miss the roster. Lastly, I have the Eagles keeping 4 safeties. I debated between 4 or 3, because Cooper DeJean will be a safety. He's listed as both a safety and a corner on their depth chart. So, obviously a nickel corner, but still, he's listed as both. So, for right now, I have the Eagles taking 4 safeties, mainly for depth purposes. Andrew Mabuka makes sense, was a starter last year, going to be a starter this year. Marcus Epps, I believe, kind of has the first safety, or the second safety job, kind of locked down alongside Andrew Mabuka, because they've been playing Michael Carter the second a lot more during the preseason. So that kind of tells me that the veteran has a lockdown. Speaking of Michael Carter II, he's staying on as a depth safety piece, especially if they need to rotate a guy in for Marcus Epps or a guy in for Andrew Mabuka for some rest. But Michael Carter, to me, is going to be the backup guy at safety. And then I kept one more guy. Where is he at? Maximus Pulley. Now, there's quite a few other guys ahead of him, but the reason I kept Maximus Pulley is due to the fact that he's a younger safety. He's only 23 years old. He's been really solid during the preseason games, having 5 tackles alone during last preseason game. Come on. Give me the previous game, too. Come on. Whatever. Maximus Pulley, I don't think will see the field at all, but ultimately, I think will be a solid depth piece, a young guy to kind of coach up, and hopefully, God forbid, he makes the roster. He makes the roster. And yeah, so I just got to the end of this, and just realized I need 3 spots, one for Braden Mann, one for Jake Elliott, and one for a long snapper. So, yeah. Take this as you will. This is, take all this with a grain of salt, then. There are quite a few guys like Ringo and Pulley. They're gone. There you go. Kelee Ringo, not making the roster. Maximus Pulley, I just talked about this guy. Not making the roster. They're keeping Braden Mann and Jake Elliott. There you go. And they're having Drew Kendall as their long snapper. There you go. Everyone's happy. That's 53. I did my job. I somehow pulled this off. I don't know how I did this, but it took me like a solid 2 hours to figure out how to rearrange all the depth pieces out of O-line and D-line. So ultimately, I do think that this is very, very, very subjective. This is my personal opinions, obviously. But, yeah. That's kind of it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. We're getting into those longer form episodes. Not this week, but not next week, but the week after that will be a super long episode where I'm breaking down every division and division winner, my Super Bowl prediction, and all my award predictions for this upcoming season. So please stay tuned for that. Yeah, I will catch you guys next week for probably a shorter episode. I'm going back to college, guys, so episodes will be on Wednesdays, once a week, hopefully at least an hour. throughout the regular season, and we'll get back into our original groove where we break down every game by the stats, and I kind of tell you my overall thoughts. So hopefully we get back into that groove, but ultimately, I hope you guys have enjoyed this offseason, but we are so close to regular season football. I don't want to go back to school, but I know if I go back to school, that means that football is back, and I'm going to take that. So remember, I hope you guys have a good one, and go Birds.